Welcome to This Sporting Planet, the world's view of sport this week from the Americas, Asia, and Europe. Women's sport has been front and center of the sporting agenda in 2025, and new stars making headlines across the globe.
And it's something we've particularly felt here in Europe, especially in England, where I am based. So after the Lionesses won the Euros in the summer, hot on the heels of Arsenal winning the Champions League, our attention switched from a round ball to an oval-shaped one and the Rugby World Cup. And in fact, the Red Roses did the job we all hoped for, certainly here in England on home soil, beating Canada in the final to win their first title since 2014.
Yeah, and what's been happening with Natalie in Europe isn't in isolation. Interest in and the success of women's sport is accelerating at pace across the globe. But what's behind this phenomenon? Will the pace of growth sustain? And which sports had the biggest growth opportunities in the next few years? Well, we'll discuss it all on This Sporting Planet.
Natalie Sawyer here in the UK alongside Edward Russell in Singapore and Todd Harris from the USA. And a little bit later on, we're going to be hearing from Rugby World Cup winner Abbie Ward. But first, it's been a little bit of a while, guys, since we've been together. So I suppose there's been a lot to catch up on when it comes to sporting highlights over the last few weeks. So Todd, let's come to you first. What's been the pick of the last few weeks?
All right, can I just get this out of the way right off the bat? I was wrong on the Ryder Cup selection. Europe, I don't want to say they dominated because the last day was intriguing. And I thought the U.S. was going to pull off the comeback for the century. But that was all in the background to me because I have to apologize. I thought the behavior by the fans on site was atrocious. Not a golf purist, but I kind of feel like there's a line and then they're stepping over the line. And I think, unfortunately, that line was stepped across. I thought it marred what was an amazing event. I thought the Europeans... I just took it to the Americans. I don't know if it was bad decisions by the coaches for the Ryder Cup, but I just thought the European team came in more prepared. They seemed like they knew what they were doing more, and it seemed like the Americans were second guessing until they got to Sunday, and then it was a great comeback. So I want to get that out of the way first of all. Second of all, Major League Baseball playoffs, it is going to be awesome. I can't wait to see if the Dodgers defend their title. Shohei Ohtani might be on my list for player of the year, athlete of the year, but I won't spoil that just yet. It's a great story there. And then, of course, college and NFL football. I was lucky enough to go up to Dublin a few weeks ago and see my beloved Vikings lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But it was great to see the NFL expanding again around the world. So that's kind of what I've been watching. I now yield the floor.
Edward, what about you?
Well, it's been a busy couple of weeks, actually, because the F1 show has swept through Singapore. It's been 16 years of night racing here, and it still feels just as special as ever. It quite literally takes over the streets. It's right there in the middle of the CBD because it is a street race, and the whole city comes alive. It's gone just beyond the race now. It's like a week-long festival, basically. So music-wise, Elton John, the Foo Fighters were performing, Romeo Beckham, Superman himself, David Corenswet were out and about in Singapore. I was lucky enough to be in the paddock and the pit lane interviewing the drivers and got some really good insight into their season and what they do behind the scenes off the grid as well. We were hoping that it would be a little bit more decisive in terms of the Drivers' Championship. Of course, the Singapore race enabled McLaren to pick up the Constructors' Championship. But, there was all this talk going into it. Will it be Piastri? Will it be Norris? Could Max Verstappen make it 3 victories in a row? And then George Russell came out of nowhere and took maximum points. So the championship will rage on, and so too will next year's Singapore GP. Early bird tickets, by the way, for Singapore GP 2026 already sold out.
Ooh. Wow. Well, that goes to show just how popular it is. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Ryder Cup, Todd, because, of course, very happy as a European to see them get the job done, especially when you go back to 2012 for the last time Europe won on American soil. But I certainly was nervous on that final singles day with the comeback from Team USA. But the job was kind of done over the first couple of days. What I wanted to mention, really, was that England are the first European team to book their place at the World Cup for 2026. It's been a flawless qualifying campaign so far in terms of wins and points for Thomas Tuchel and his team. So we are rejoicing in that. And I just want to take you to the sort of North Yorkshire, East Yorkshire, I should say, where Hull KR are celebrating over the weekend because they are the Super League Grand Final winners. They beat Wigan Warriors at Old Trafford in convincing form as well, 24-6 to complete a famous treble. It's the first time they've won the Super League. They have won a league title before, but you've got to go back to pre the Super League days. you have to remember their story is quite interesting because only 5 years ago they finished bottom of Super League, and it was only because of COVID that they weren't relegated. So to go from that to now Super League winners is quite phenomenal. And as I say, they completed a famous treble because they also won the League Leaders Shield. So that is the regular season when they've topped the table, as well as the Challenge Cup. So the Red Robins have been bouncing along.
Boy, so quite a lot has happened since we last caught up in
Yeah.
terms of sport. I did actually stay up to watch that England game, that thrashing. So they're looking good, aren't they? Perhaps, yeah, who knows, maybe a first World Cup since 1966. On the subject of firsts and World Cups, congratulations as well to Cape Verde, Uzbekistan and Jordan, who've all qualified for their first ever World Cup too. You can find out all about that on our social channels, and we're looking forward to the World Cup draw in a couple of months' time. Now, a reminder, in between episodes, you can keep up to date with all the global sports news on our social channels and YouTube page, including full-length interviews with all of our guests. So please do check that out, and all the other interviews that are on there. Whilst you're there, please do give us a follow, a subscribe, and share with all your friends and family as well. Plus, please do leave us a review if it is a nice one.
Right, I want us to focus on women's sports, if you don't mind, because it's been a pretty fantastic year. And in fact, they're having a moment in 2025, particularly here in Europe. This has been helped in no small part by Arsenal winning the Champions League, and then England winning not only the Football European Championships, but also the Rugby World Cup. This is something we've actually talked about previously on This Sporting Planet when I was joined by Kate Allman and Colette Wong to talk about all the great work that has been going on around the world to improve the opportunities for women in sport. So that was in May, that podcast. Let's fast forward to what has happened now. And I certainly think it's worth us revisiting and chatting about it again. And I suppose when I've just outlined some of the great results that we've had in England here with not only domestic or European action for Arsenal, but what the England footballers and England rugby team have done. How do you think, or how do you both see the growth of women's sport? I mean, Edward, let me come to you. Do you think we're in a unique period for it?
I think we certainly are in Europe. Absolutely. I mean, what a summer of women's sport it's been over there. And as you mentioned, the women's team defending their Euros title. I was looking at some of the records. 29 of 31 matches sold out, a record-breaking number of tickets sold ahead of the tournament, I guess based upon, how well England did in the last iteration. But an overall attendance of 657,000 odd, that's a new record. It's fantastic to see countries, particularly on the international stage, getting behind their women's teams. And, recently when I was in London, they've even named a whole train line after the Lionesses. So there is a lot of love there. I do wonder though, Natalie, how much does it translate into domestic attendances and domestic interest in, say, the WSL? Because is it just an opportunity to get behind the country once every 2-4 years, but week in, week out, are they still watching the women's game domestically as well?
Well, in a way, the appetite for it is there in the sense of it's accessible everywhere. The BBC, Sky, TNT, now Disney Plus have got involved in showing the Women's Champions League, for example. It is there. So in a way, it makes you feel as though the want is there. The problem is I'm not actually sure that attendances are going up as much as they would have wanted it to. And the similar with maybe viewing figures as well. So that's the slight concern, I think, that the WSL and football in general is going at this present moment. But that being said, you can walk along the streets and there'll be kids there who are wearing shirts with Russo on their back or Chloe Kelly or whoever it is, because these are now becoming household names. And that means if they're becoming names that we are just talking about in general conversation now, it means they're making an impact. And that's what we've got to harness and ensure that this period of women's sport continues to develop and grow and becomes the norm, really. But look, as I mentioned earlier on, one of the big sporting stories of the last few weeks here in Europe was England winning the Rugby Women's World Cup and extending their 3-year winning run even further. Quite incredible. A lot of the squad went off and on a well-deserved holiday, as you can well imagine, after their victory over Canada in the final. But after they got back, I had the chance to speak to Abbie Ward, who scored one of the tries in that final and was one of the Red Roses' standout players in the tournament. Here's some of that chat. Abbie, tell us then, how have the last couple of weeks been? Because it's been absolutely phenomenal. First of all, I should say congratulations as well. It's been absolutely incredible what you've all achieved with the Red Roses.
Yeah, it's been crazy. It's been an absolute whirlwind. obviously everyone has seen, that moment of us winning the World Cup, but, so much has gone into that. The day was spectacular. Honestly, couldn't imagine anything like it. Stepping off the bus it felt like all 82,000 fans were there lining the walkway. The game itself, I loved every minute, actually. Loved every minute of it. Obviously, the result was amazing. And since then, yeah, it's been a whirlwind. It's kind of hard to come down from.
Well, I can well imagine. I mean, to create history like you've done is absolutely amazing. I suppose what we want to know, really, Abbie, is how were the celebrations?
Yeah, the celebrations were good. They were so good. They were much needed. It's been a tough, pre-season, tough tournament, and I mean, you've got to celebrate hard, haven't you? They lasted long, not just into the night, into the next few days. There was a group of us that went away last week to Ibiza to continue the celebrations. I'm not sure how much of that was able to go onto Instagram, but it's just a lot of fun. And one thing that I love about this group and the Red Roses is the girls, the group. We really enjoy each other's company. We really do celebrate each other, lift each other up. And so after games and tournaments and spectacles like that, it's just about coming together and bottling that moment, I think.
So how is this group bonded? Like you say, you just said this is an amazing group of women who have come together to achieve something fantastic. But how have you done that?
It's a really good question, and it's something which, as a group, we've really looked at. We've looked at how we can create that, because I think the best teams, the tightest teams, the teams that work hardest for each other are those that are the most close-knit. So it's something that we've really gone after in the last 3 years, and we've done that through not like just the big moments, but the little moments, how we interact day to day, how we spend time with each other off the pitch as well as on the pitch, how we celebrate and acknowledge the individuals as well, because for me, that's what I love about rugby. 1 to 15, you need the variety of positions. It wouldn't work if everyone was the same. And I think that's exactly the same with personalities. So for us, it's been about knowing each other on a deeper level, like sharing our personal stories, our personal journeys. So you have that better understanding, and then you know how better to interact. And it just makes you tighter as a group. And I think that has been a point of difference and something really special about the Red Roses.
Being a part of the squad that lost the last World Cup final, was that also something that you and everyone else that had been involved at that time sort of used as well as a kind of incentive, like we've got to finally get it done because we are such a great team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they're such hard pills to swallow when, something like that happens. And the game itself in 2017, coming down to the last play, it was really difficult. But I also experienced that in 2017 when we were up at half time and then we lost, and 2022, was the last play. So yes, I think that definitely spurs you on. It definitely gives you that extra hunger, but it's a hunger and desire that the whole squad had anyway. I think what it also gives you is, when you, and I have only found this as I've matured in my career and potentially also becoming a mother, you have a different perspective. I can now look back at those games and be proud of, for a long time, I wouldn't even want to talk about those games or think about it. Or for me, I was almost embarrassed, for us losing. I remember after the 2022 final, coming around and seeing my family, I couldn't even look them in the eye, and really felt that. But now, obviously I look back at it and, I'm proud to be involved in those moments, because I've also been so lucky to witness a huge growth and change in the women's sporting landscape, and definitely in women's rugby landscape. So to go from those events and then to be part of a World Cup final at Twickenham, which was sold out, and to get the result, it definitely makes it puts everything into perspective. It makes it also worthwhile, and I think you realise even more how special it is.
We'll talk more about the growth of women's rugby a little bit later on as well, but something I wanted to just pick up on, you mentioned being a mother now. What are the challenges like as a rugby player and as a mother too?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. It's definitely a balancing act, shall we say.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I feel so fortunate, so proud to be able to bring my daughter up surrounded by so many strong women, so many inspiring role models. And like I said, rugby in particular, I think is such a healthy sport to be surrounded in, the values, but also, like I said, from 1 to 15, everyone is so different. And everyone is celebrated. It was definitely tough through the World Cup, but knowing it was a home World Cup and I was never too far away. I think adding to that the quarter and semi-finals being in Bristol, I couldn't have written it any better. So I could go home, I could stay at home, and yeah, the squad's been unbelievable as well. There was one game we kind of try and plan it out, me and my husband, and how we'll work it and how we can. Logistically is the biggest problem. There was one game where he was working, he coaches rugby team, and I was obviously at the World Cup and our family weren't around, and it was quite funny actually because it was Samoa, so I wasn't due to play but I was due to warm up. So Hallie, my daughter, ended up coming to the game but solely in the Red Roses care. So Amy Kakay and Alex Matthews were on duty all morning. They were with her in the stands carrying the porta potty. I was warming up and then John made them a packed lunch, and they were just sat in front of the coaches. And I think that's something that's so special about women's sport and women's rugby, and definitely the Red Roses and what we've built in that culture, because you probably wouldn't see that other places. At the pinnacle of, like you said, we've talked about, is it such a pressure environment? Yes, it is. We're playing for a World Cup, but also it's acknowledged. Yeah, everyone has different lives, different things that they're juggling. Abbie's a mum. Hallie is part of the team. She's going to come with us. She'll sit on the bus. She'll love it. And we just get on with it.
I love it. She's like the mini Rose, which is brilliant, I'm sure. But it also goes to show how we are in a time where you can be a mother and have a career, and a sporting career at that as well.
Definitely. And I think the biggest thing that I would like to other people to think about and learn, and it's like you can, but you need support. I'm very lucky that I've had that support, and it's been okay to say, okay, I'm a bit stuck this week. Hallie's going to have to come with us. And it's like, yeah, how do we make it work? How do we make sure that Abbie can concentrate on her job? Because, if someone got injured in the warm-up, I would have then been playing. But also put her at ease to know that, don't worry, Hallie's happy with us. She's quite happy in the stands. We've got everything that we need. It can absolutely be done. You can either do it the hard way, or you can have people, help you out. And if you've got that support, it is much easier.
Let me ask you about the final. Let's get back to it. You went behind very early on in the game to Canada. What happened once you went behind? Were there any conversations on the pitch to change things? How was it? How did you go about making sure that this is a minor blip, but we're going to come through?
Yeah, it's something that we're quite comfortable in going behind. People speak about the Red Rose and they'll say, oh, but you're used to winning every game. We're used to also being under a lot of pressure, as we've spoken about. There's lots of games where we've gone behind early on, lots of big games. I can think of, France away in Six Nations, New Zealand, Canada. When we played them last year in the WXV, I think we were behind for a lot of that game. We're used to it. We, as a playing group, we know how to fix it on pitch. We know whether it's, a detail error, whether it's just an execution error. For us, we there was maybe one minor fix up, but it wasn't like, okay, we need to change anything drastically. It was very much, okay, yeah, we trust the plan, we trust the process. Let's just go out there and assert our game plan onto them, which we did. And, I think Zoe Harrison was unbelievable in the way that we asserted our pressure plan, our kick to compete plan on them. And then the set piece came alive. The forwards do what the forwards do best, which is a lot of scrumming, pushing, mauling, doing the grunt work. And
Tell us a little bit about the Canada story as well, and how incredible it was for them to get to the final, when you consider they had to do a bit of crowdfunding as well to get them to go as far as essentially as they did in this World Cup.
Yeah, definitely. Canada are one of the teams that aren't fully professional. A lot of the players play in a semi-professional guise. A lot of them play in the PWR, which is the English Premiership, but it's not fully professional. Fully professional players at the minute are usually kind of professional through their union. So the likes of New Zealand, France, ourselves, Wales, Scotland. What I will say is it's great to see, as soon as those first contracts came in, other nations started following suit. I think we've seen how successful the World Cup has been. You know, the most tickets sold, over 5 million people tuning into the final. Like, I'd love to see more investment. I'd love to see more teams go professional. I'd love to see, you know, more kind of Jenga blocks tumbling and that the next nations to go professional to support their women. Because like you said, it's an unbelievable story for a team that's not fully professional to still perform like they did, to still get to a World Cup final and put an unbelievable display of rugby on show. So yeah, I hope the eyes on women's rugby, on women's sport, can see what a huge investment, potential investment it is, and do so. But yeah, I think as England, we always try and set the standard, push the standard, you know, break those glass ceilings, pave the way, and hope that we can bring other nations along, or we can learn from other nations that are doing stuff better than ourselves. That was also the case with like the maternity, and to see more of the professional nations now introducing maternity policies or working parent policies that are fit for purpose is amazing. So let's see what the next steps hold for us as well.
So how do you see yourself as a role model on and off the pitch? Do you like that? Because the way you're talking, and obviously in the way that the England setup is, they are one of the front runners really, when it comes to the growth of women's rugby.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that for me, this is something that is what is a role model that has changed for me over the years. I think something which is so special about the game is like, as women's players, we really care about the growth. We're really invested in it, and we realise that we're a big part of that. So I think, you know, growing up, I didn't have many or any really kind of female rugby role models. I didn't know there was an England team. You talk about see it to be it. I think it's really important that as players we are putting ourselves out there, you know, so young girls and boys can see what amazing, you know, role models there are. I also think it's important to show those characters and individuals, because sometimes it can be quite hard to relate to the red rose or a white shirt, but you might be able to relate to Ellie Kildunn's fashion sense, Sarah Burns' music taste, what Lark Davies does on a weekend. And it's those connections. And if that sparks something inside someone that is sat at home, or, you know, I want to be a rugby player, but I don't really see myself as an England player, but actually, like, that's something I can relate to. That's something that, you know, I'm interested in. I think that's hugely important. And then I also think the other side of, you know, being a role model, and definitely something that I've learned, is what we can do for the game broader. What we can do, you know, I was part of the group of players that kind of was on board with striving to get better contracts. You know, I had a small part to play in the maternity policies and the, you know, the working parent policy that we're looking at now, like how we can do more for the broader game through those policies and stuff behind the scenes that people don't necessarily see, but it's huge. And like I said, when I first started, it wasn't professional. I, you know, saw the introduction of the first contracts, and since then there's been, you know, it's changed and it's adapted. But I think there's a huge role for players to play in that, and in how that progresses, how that changes. And we might not see the benefits. I probably won't see the benefits, but if it will help the next generation along, then I think that is so, so important.
It's legacy building, isn't it, really, at the end of the day? And after winning the World Cup, this is the key moment, isn't it, for women's rugby, especially in England, to ensure, like you say, for generations to come, there is a game for them to play.
Yeah, absolutely. We always said, you know, definitely one of the goals was to win the World Cup, but the second goal was to create a legacy. There's been such huge momentum. We don't want it to stop now. We don't want it to be, oh my God, that final, England lifting the trophy at Twickenham, wasn't that brilliant? And then women's rugby just kind of falls off. We've built this momentum. We want to grow the game. We want to keep that. We saw what, obviously, the amazing spectacle of the Lionesses winning the Euros in England, and how that kind of boosted girls rugby, girls football in England. Like, we want to create the same. We want to create the same kind of wave that the Lionesses have created, and we really think we can. And Like I said, I think rugby for me, it's so amazing because I really do think there is a position and a place for absolutely everybody. So if we can show that to as many people as possible, create as many opportunities to play, get involved, volunteer, coach, whatever aspect it is, then for me, that's that legacy piece that we talk about.
Well, that just was a small part of my chat with Abbie Ward, and you can listen to it in full over on our YouTube channel. But it was really great to speak to Abbie. And honestly, just chatting to her, I kind of got this sense of what a leader she is within that team. She spoke so brilliantly about, obviously, the setup of England and how they've all bonded to create this incredible kind of vibe within the team that kind of has helped them to this victory at Twickenham in that final, but also about being a role model, about being a mother now as well. I mean, just to reflect a little bit more on that final, 82,000. It was a sellout at Twickenham. Only the men's 2003 Rugby World Cup final had a bigger attendance, which, on the subject of the growing popularity of women's sport, just goes to show that that appetite is there.
I was just thinking, Natalie, I mean, if this were the men's team, for England to have won, say, in the men's team, both the European Championships and then the Rugby World Cup in the same year, I mean, that would be off the scale. Has it been lessened at all because it is the women's team, or are England celebrating just as hard?
I mean, I think you're probably right. If it was the men's team, it would be slightly different. There probably would be calls for lots of bank holidays so that everyone can keep celebrating. And listen, they celebrated well with both the Euros and the rugby team winning as well. But maybe it was a bit more muted, shall we say, than in terms of how we as the public would have celebrated had it been a men's team. But that being said, what I loved as well, at the Red Roses celebration at Battersea, some of the Lionesses were there because they wanted to champion fellow women. And that to me in itself, if you're a young kid going to watch those celebrations and you're seeing Lionesses, you're thinking, I can rub shoulders with these people and I want more of that. I want to be a part of this winning culture that hopefully is being bred here. And as I mentioned with that interview with Abbie, we should say that the RFU have done great work with women's rugby. The fact that we are professional, the fact that, they're so well funded. And I know you briefly touched on it, Todd, but obviously Canada had to crowdfund to get themselves to that final, which in itself seems balmy that you have one team who is so well financially backed and yet another basically begging for help.
And I think that goes a lot towards where Canada puts their priorities. Obviously, hockey's enormous there. The Canadian Football League, basketball is gaining some traction up there as well. But I think as the growth comes, it'll happen. I think what stood out, and great interview by you, Natalie, with Abbie, some of the things she said that stuck out to me was how she said, I may not see the benefits of this, but the people down the line will. And I think that's the kind of attitude, that's the kind of leadership that they need. It's not going to happen overnight. It'd be great if it did, but it's not right now. And then the sense of camaraderie and team, they have so many talented players on that team, and they went through a bit of a gauntlet to get to where they did. And so they are rightfully crowned champions. But the little things that she mentioned that they have to do, her husband's working, she's got to play, who's going to watch the little one? And the team just steps in and says, we got you. And so I think that sense of family, it just really cements the team spirit, the team bond. And those are the kind of things you don't teach. Those are the kind of things that just happen organically on a championship team. And it was well-deserved. And I love the fact that Twickenham is to rugby, either men or women, like Wimbledon is to tennis. I just feel like Twickenham is rugby center. And obviously it's a soft spot in my heart, but I just think it's such a great setting. That stadium is spectacular.
In the States, Todd, there's been so much investment in women's sport. We've talked about the WNBA. Next year, I know there are plans to kick off the Premier Lacrosse League for women and the Women's Professional Baseball League as well. There's clearly a lot of investment. Do you think it's purely a commercial decision behind those, or is the effort really there to grow the women's game in all these different sports?
I think there's a bit of that, Edward, and I think a lot of it too has to go towards that attitude of if you build it, they will come. And I think the fact that people are now investing in women's sports is a great thing. And I think it's a little bit of an eye-opener, like, hey, this is actually really good competition. This is actually really good. The bottom line is if it's enticing, if it's high caliber, if it's presented well, I think people will watch it. And so I think the WNBA is going through a bit of a renaissance, the way they're presenting games and where they're showing it. ESPN does a great job with that. I think women's golf, women's tennis also there. You talked about some of the new leagues. They're talking about a women's hockey league, ice hockey league. So there's definitely people that are getting involved. Investors, both men and women, are getting involved. I think it's Serena Williams' husband that is getting involved with a track
Alexis
and
field
promotion, which they just had one in New York City a short time ago. So yes, I'm a firm believer if you build it, they will come. And if it's a good show and it's compelling, people will watch.
The beauty of where we are in Europe, we host so many tournaments, and I'm talking about men's game and as well as women's, that, you know, now we're seeing some of the men's, obviously how men's football flourishes incredibly, that women now want to get into that as well. I know UEFA obviously feel like that, FIFA likewise too. And there's no doubt that having a tournament or a big event in your region, your country, just helps to boost the popularity of that sport, Todd.
Yeah, there's so many questions. There's so many. I wish there was someone that could look into the future, the crystal ball, and say, this is what's going to happen. This is what needs to happen. And this is how we get there. But the bottom line is, there's just so much to put into the cake batter and the mix, and to find out how do we make the perfect resolution for all athletes, both men and women, where it's equitable, where they're covered equally, they're covered fairly. I'm a big fan of, pay them what they're worth when we talk about athletes and athlete empowerment, but the money also has to be there. So you can't say, hey, I'm worth $10 million. We don't have the $10 million. Well, then I'm out. So if the money's there, divide it up, make it fair.
There's a great irony in this part of the world, Natalie, that in terms of crowds turning up to watch football matches, men's football matches, there are actually more women in the crowd than there are men's, particularly in South Korea. Apparently, women make up 55-60% of fans at professional sporting events, whether that's baseball, basketball, football. A lot of it is down to the kind of hero worshipping, I guess. If you take Korea, for example, all the girls are turning up to support Son. They're all turning up to support their favorite men's sports stars as much as they would their favorite K-pop idols or anything like that. So there is an appetite for women in sport, just not necessarily the women playing sport, if that makes sense.
It does. Listen, at the end of the day, we can only champion what the Lionesses have done, what the Red Roses have done, what Arsenal have done here in England, certainly. And we can only hope for further success and the growth of women's sport.
Well, that's it for this episode. Make sure to subscribe to the show via your favorite podcast provider so you never miss an episode, and make sure to leave us a review as well.
We'll be back next week chatting about the state of sport more broadly and discussing the tension between the growing profile of athletes and the sports they compete in. What positives are there for athletes gaining a bigger celebrity status, and what dangers does that pose for the traditional sporting institutions? The three of us will be joined by the former ESPN executive John Cosner to discuss.
And just a reminder, as with every episode, you can watch This Sporting Planet on Spotify and YouTube. Would love for you to get involved in the discussion in the comments as well. For now, though, from Todd, Natalie, myself, and the whole This Sporting Planet team, bye-bye. We'll see you next time.